Welcome to Business Files. We continue our series of programs leading up to the February 19th general elections. On this edition, Chester Humphrey talks politics, economy and foreign policy and gives his endorsement to one female candidate. I'm Kalis Rafari and this edition starts right now. We begin tonight with our snapshot of women in politics. Business Files caught up with NNP candidate Delma Thomas and asked her what it's like to be a female on the platform. We are in the middle of an election campaign. What is the experience like for a woman in politics in a campaign? How has your experience been?
It has been, sometimes challenging, sometimes exciting. Challenging in terms of, when I have to deal with issues at home. When I got into politics, I had to leave a job. That's the first time, 2007. So my kids, were very concerned because mommy leaving her job to go into something where they're not sure she will get paid and she's not sure she will win the seat. And my 8-year-old son then, was bombarding me with questions. Mommy, why are you leaving your work? Why are you leaving teaching and going into a job where you're not sure you're going to win? Mommy, why so many people coming, just forget them.
So at 8 years old, your son had economic concerns about mommy getting into politics.
At 8 years old, he was very, very much concerned, and to me, that he had this kind of thing that he's not supporting NNP at that time. At that time, he said, I'm not supporting NNP because sometimes I give away everything that I have. And when he come to me asking, I say, I don't have. So he says, I cannot support them then. But after the last 4.5 years, or maybe the last 3 years, him being older, understand that we, from Christian background, he grew up being in church, teaching, convert class, he growing in church. He then realized that, because I always say to them, that God has a purpose for all of us life. Sometimes we don't understand what our purpose is. And even when we are called, for example, getting involved in politics in 2007, if I say I was called, then how come you didn't win? Is the question he or other people would ask. If you see that call from God, then how come you didn't win the election? But, God sometimes gives us tests. Because we must have testing times in the end for us to have a testimony. Without no testing time, there's no testimony. And sometimes the timing is not our timing, it's God's timing. Sometimes we want things our way, our time, but God doesn't allow it to happen that way. He works in his own timing. So I believe losing the last election was a blessing. At times, sometimes you wonder, Lord, why did you allow that to happen? You question God. But then after spending the last 4.5 years, I realized that it was God testing me, preparing me for bigger things to come.
Well, you certainly can't fix the world's problems, but you are with a party that all indications and analysis says will likely form the next government and would be in a direct position to address a lot of these issues. Why should the women of this country believe in the NNP and believe in you that a better environment will be created where they can find jobs and they can take care of themselves?
I believe that the New National Party has a proven track record, a track record that shows that they provided for young people. When we hear about youth development, I believe the first serious youth development program came in under the watch of the New National Party government. When we talk about, when you go into the rural communities and you see the pain and suffering now, one can only look back at what was there before. And under the New National Party government before, we were looking after those who cannot help themselves. And we agree that government cannot provide for all. But we also believe that government have a responsibility to provide for those who can't provide for themselves. So an NNP government is going to ensure that people who cannot help themselves, so we're not going to go giving everybody all that they ask for. But there are situations when there are people who cannot work or sometimes there isn't a job for them, then you ought to provide for them. You have to make sure that you see the young people are properly trained. They get the proper skills and knowledge and the attitude that is necessary for them to go forward. We also going to ensure that even those who cannot go to school, we're going to make sure that they go to school. I think it's a responsibility that we have as government to look to deal with those issues that confront us, the issue of health, the issue of education, the issue of employment. We must work. And if we cannot work as an NMP government to deal with those issues, then it doesn't make sense that we're seeking election to be elected.
Do you believe that the NNP has learned lessons from the last defeat, and it would inform and shape how they govern this time?
The NMP must learn lessons, there are a lot of lessons to be learned from the last election after we have lost, because you know NNP came from 8, then they had 11, no, all 15 seats, and then back to 8, and then lost the election. So it must have been something you did well then when you got 15, and something went wrong somewhere. That's the reason why you got 8 and then lost the last election. I think complacency stepped in. You know, there are a lot of things that happened, and I believe it was a learning period for the NNP to make them better and wiser person in decision making.
And so we will see.
You should expect. You should expect a different government, one who would not look at like spite and hate, and one who would not say, for example, if you support another political party, tell you you're competent but you can't get a job because of that. No, I believe they would be different because they understand and they feel the pain and the suffering for the last 4.5 years and realize that we have to be different. And I think we will go forward being different, embracing everyone despite of their political affiliation.
Sometimes a campaign tends to get very vicious, and women on the platform are usually the target of very degrading comments from their male opponents in certain instances. Does that bother you? Does it concern you in any way at all, or you figure, okay, it's just part of the landscape?
I mean, I will never be part of slandering people's character. I think there's a bigger issue to deal with. Sometimes when people want to attack my opponent, I say, you don't have to do that. Because, I mean, the people have seen for the last 4.5 years. Why remind them of the level of pain and suffering they went through? I have experienced, degrading remarks made, but I believe Christianity has made me a stronger person, a better person, so I can deal with those issues when they confront me. Because I believe at the end of the day, once you pray to God diligently, He will reward you. And then those weapons that is formed against you cannot prosper. So at the end of the day, those lies and things may made about, like people would say lies about you, at the end of the day, people will realize that it's not true. So I don't give up like that. Maybe if I was going to take this on and give up 3 or 4 months ago, when the election was approaching, and I recalled I was at work in St. George's University, and the girl in the bank said, I need to talk to you urgently. And I was wondering, what urgent about? And when I see that, she said to me, I know the election is coming, but you came, you have a good job. I don't think you should leave and go back into politics. As Christian, you have to know your calling and your purpose in life. So maybe if I didn't know my purpose, maybe I would just fall for what she said. But I know my purpose. My purpose is the bigger picture. Not me owning a dollar, not me being able to take care of my family, but looking to serve others. Because I was saying earlier on in a private conversation with this Senator of the House, the former Senator of the House, Ms. Nichols, that at the end of the day, God is not asking you how many times you went to church or how many times you read the Bible, but whatsoever you did to the least of my brethren. So therefore, I have a responsibility to do the will of God. So I'm going to do it without fear or favor. I'm going to do my best. So I want to promise my constituents and the entire country. And I sing it over and over. I think they have heard it for the last 4.5 years. They have seen it before. And I believe that's one of the reasons why a lot of people are gravitating towards maybe me and the New National Party now. Because the short while I get involved in politics, I started preaching the whole issue of inclusion and the whole issue of I say, tell me, when I see people who live near to me and they are hungry, are you saying to me that I should not give them things that is available from government because they support another political party? So I believe all that would create a win for me in the next election. I believe firmly so. And that's the reason why you have to go through those testing times so people could see you and judge you. And because, I mean, less than a year maybe wasn't enough time to judge me. The 4.5 years, when I spent all those time, yes, I spent all those time going from village to village, talking to people, seeing their plight, seeing how I could help, going to the businesses and asking for contribution. They realize, well, this is somebody who's caring. This is somebody who cares about our needs. And therefore, I believe that will make me victorious come the next election. And I'm going to be working with every person, despite of their race, their political affiliation.
Especially that.
That's the one that divides us and creates so much a problem among us. So we must deal with it.
Well, I want to thank you for sitting down with Business Files to talk about some of the issues, and I certainly want to wish you good luck in the election coming up. So thanks for being here.
I'd like to thank you for inviting me to Business Files, and I look forward to being back here after the next general election.
Well, we might be interviewing you as the minister of something, in a few months' time.
Yeah.
This is Business Files. We'll be back.
If prosperity really matters to you, come home to Grenada Cooperative Bank. Since 1932, we have shared the same values: financial diligence, investing with prudence, transparent compliance, consistent performance.
Welcome home, Grenada.
No matter the economic climb, we always stand the test of time.
Welcome home, Grenada, the bank that goes the extra mile. Welcome home, Grenada, the bank that serves with a smile.
Welcome to a bank you can truly call your own. Grenada Cooperative Bank.
We care because you matter.
Welcome home.
This is Business Files, and I'm your host, Callistra Faria. This week, we are pleased to welcome here and into your living rooms and bars and wherever else you might happen to be, Senator Chester Humphrey. Senator, welcome to Business Files. Thanks for speaking with us. Well, we're in the middle of an election campaign. We're down to the final stretch. What are the big issues for Grenadians right now going into this election?
Well, first of all, let me thank you for the opportunity of appearing on Business Files. It's a program that I have seldom actually appeared on. I know it is Business Files, so I thought it had automatically excluded the Workers' Files. But thanks for the opportunity. What are the big issues facing the country in this election?
Mm-hmm.
There are essentially three. The first is management, because management would underlie everything that is done or not done. So management of the country is, to my mind, one of the biggest issues. In fact, when the people go to the poll, to my mind, they would be pronouncing on the management of the country. So that's point number one. Point number two, and I must agree with Dr. Mitchell here, it would be the economy. The performance or otherwise of the economy over the last 4.5 years, and what are the probabilities for improving performance for the upcoming 5-year period. So there'll be two things. And in that, of course, there would be major sub-issues. So that's how I see it. First and foremost, the management. And the results of the election would be a testimony of the scoring in terms of what the people see. Because how this economy was managed in the face of this crisis, the people will be voting on that. All right? So when people go to the poll, of course, they may not express it as lucidly and as succinctly and as exact as I may do, but essentially, this is what this vote is all about. This vote is about the quality of leadership, the kind of leadership, and therefore that speaks to the question of management. And then, of course, the economy. As I believe it was President Reagan who made this statement popular when asked in the middle of an electoral campaign a question similar to the one you put to me. He simply replied, "The economy, stupid." He meant that the person was asking the question was stupid when it was so glaring that what's at stake here is the economy. What's at stake here is nothing to do with transparency and good governance and who thief money and who didn't thief money.
So when the
really
Minister of Finance, for instance, says that this election is going to be on trust, do you think he's off
No, it's
base?
been an obscurantist. He's been an obscurantist, he's ducking the issue. And of course I don't fault him. Because if your performance has been poor, then you don't project your performance, you project something else. So he's only doing naturally what anyone would do. It's a matter of self-defense. So I don't fault him. I'm just saying that his tactics and strategy is banal, it's empty, and I don't see how it will help them.
And so at this stage, the economy, the big issue here, do you have any level of belief that this government, if returned to office,
No,
can
the
do
central
anything?
feature of the Tillman Thomas government is its incompetence. It has been the most incompetent government ever to have visited the shores of Grenada. As a matter of fact, and I put them in a position worse than Blaise, to be quite frank. After 4.5 years, there's absolutely nothing to show. I want us to be reminded of two things. And that is, yes, there's a world economic recession. There's no doubt about that. The recession has made life difficult for everybody, and governments in particular. The advanced capitalist countries that are more resilient, more buoyant, and more self-sustaining have grave difficulties. The ILO said that unemployment in 2012 grew by another, I think it was 40 million worldwide, particularly among young people, okay? And this crisis of international capital is grave. In fact, it's the gravest crisis of the capitalist system since the Great Depression, okay? So yes, that is a part of it, but quite frankly, the test of a captain is not so much the seaworthiness or unseaworthiness of a ship, but how we navigate those waters. And I'm saying in the same economic environment that St. Vincent finds itself, in the same economic environment that Dominica finds itself, St. Lucia finds itself, Antigua finds itself, they have by and large fared better than Grenada. And because there are nuance factors in all of this, in all of these difficulties, there are nuance factors that one can either seize the opportunity or fail to seize the opportunity in order to creatively bring relief to the people. And on that score, the NDC government has failed miserably. On that score, in fact, that was the point on which I started departing long before the crisis exploded inside of the NDC. In fact, the explosion of the crisis is testimony of the weak leadership, in that you started off with more than 2/3 majority in the parliament and ended to a point where, as a self-proclaimed Democrat, you're afraid to go to the parliament. I mean, it's a sad testimony. And that is after your government was saved, not by your doing, but by the doing of others. In other words, the fate of the government was not in the Prime Minister's hands. It was in the hands of others, who rather than crash the government then, decided to give it an opportunity. And rather than the Prime Minister use the opportunity to build bridges and heal wounds, he continued along the path which ultimately led to his fear of Parliament for someone who proclaimed that he is a defender of parliamentary democracy. It also pushed him into a repeat of some absurdities. So for example, he talks about democratic centralism, unable to define it. In fact, his treatment of Parliament is more akin to the democratic centralism that he detested. And it pushed him to some absurd concepts about parliamentary and Westminster democracy. The concept that in the cabinet there's a prime ministerial dictatorship is far from the truth. And you see, and that is one of the sad things of the legacy that Prime Minister Tillman Thomas would leave behind. And it's so very sad, quite frankly. It's so very sad. In many respects, I shed a tear more for him, you know, more for him, in that he was put into a position He was put into a position by others where he had to, in a sense, mutate out of the things that I believe he believed in. But because of his lack of profound understanding and his penchant to be sloganeering, all we got was slogans. But when it came down to try to explain his position, he was incapable of explaining it. Because parliamentary democracy and the role of the executive and the cabinet is not devoid of democracy. The very Constitution sets out that while the Prime Minister is the prime of all the ministers, and while he is the one who deliberates and advises the Governor General to act, there is a mechanism for balancing that power. So while he is head of the cabinet, in the parliament, it is each parliamentarian and the vote of the parliamentarian that balances that power. And if a prime minister is unaware or unconscious of the mechanisms for balancing that power, he would be in deep trouble. And I call on the population and remind them that during the first crisis, when Peter David was unceremoniously kicked out from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and it was not purely Tillman's doing. Tillman was pushed in that direction by others, and I will name them, because you see, they could best operate in the dark, and they hate to be identified. And that's one of the things they upset with me about, because I've drawn them out, right? Dr. Francis Alexis wrote a very short piece, but a very profound article. And I would invite people to revisit that article written by Dr. Francis Alexis, when he talked about the balancing of power between the executive and parliament, and that it would be folly for a prime minister not to recognize that his power in the cabinet is checked by the dispersal of power in the parliament. Because what checks that power is the ability of parliament to pass the vote of no confidence. So if the prime minister unduly and without democracy disturbs the cabinet, then those cabinet members who come from the parliament have an opportunity to check that power through the instrument of a vote of no confidence. So a prime minister cannot be unaware of that, right? And what did we have? We had the most shameless, the most brutal assault on our parliament. And let me say something to you. If Keith Mitchell did this, in all the things we've said about Dr. Mitchell, he never shut the parliament down. He never used the mechanism which was not in the letter, in its essence. The prorogation of parliament was never meant as an instrument to save a government who has lost its mandate.
How do you think history is going to record the Prime Minister?
Badly.
That particular...
Badly. Because you see, his actions will be compared against his slogans. And this is why I'm saying he has been reduced to a sloganeer. He's been reduced to a sloganeer because the essence of parliamentary democracy is the functioning of a vibrant parliament. That is what distinguishes the democratic parliamentary system from a dictatorship. In that in parliament you can go and talk. That's what you're elected to do. To represent views, to argue, to debate.
So we essentially over the last 6-7 months have had
absolutely
a dictatorship.
An abolition of parliament using the mechanism of prorogation. In other words, it was a vulgar use of a component in the Constitution whose essence was not meant to be used that way.
Do you think the Prime Minister saw the vulgarity of it but decided, you know what, political life, I'm trying to save I'm going to do it anyway? Do you think he grasped the ugliness of what he did?
Well, he's been saying two things. Two things. One of which is openly deceptive, that this is normal. And I ask him to point to any occasion in the parliamentary history of Grenada, other than when Mr. Blaze used that mechanism, that was done. So it's not normal. Normal means that something occurs fairly regularly and consistently, etc., etc., etc. So this is not normal, and that's the absurdity. And you must remember that the Prime Minister, for whatever you may think about him, is an attorney at law. So at least he has some basic command and understanding of the English language. And to pretend that his prorogation of Parliament was a normal prorogation is really just a farce, a blatant farce. And the entire country knew that it was a mechanism in order to survive. So what he did essentially was to abridge Parliament, assault Parliament, stop parliamentarians from carrying out their basic functions. Remember, according to our Constitution, the executive is answerable to the Parliament. It says so in our Constitution, that the executive is answerable to the Parliament, that the Parliament supervises the executive. The executive has to report to Parliament. So how do you run a government for 6 months without any reports? You couldn't ask a question of the government and the conduct of the executive. You couldn't raise a grievance of the people because the Parliament was shut for 6 months.
If prosperity really matters to you, come home to Grenada Cooperative Bank. Since 1932, we have shared the same values: financial diligence, investing with prudence, transparent compliance, consistent performance.
Welcome home, Grenada.
No matter the economic climb, we always stand the test of time.
Welcome home, Grenada, the bank that goes the extra mile. Welcome home, Grenada, the bank that serves with a smile.
Welcome to a bank you can truly call your own. Grenada Cooperative Bank.
We care because you matter.
Welcome home.
Beyond me.
After showcasing the biggest crowd so far of the election campaign in Satan, the NNP rescue team rides into Carriacou and Guelph this weekend. NNP Massive, get ready for Carriacou this Saturday and Guelph on Sunday. It's the weekend of the doubleheader on the march to victory on February 19. Come and hear about the plans for growth, restoration and transformation. NNP in Carriacou on Saturday, Guelph Town on Sunday. The new national party says we will deliver.
We want it, we want it. We want it, we want it. We want it, we want it.
Welcome back. We're speaking to Senator Chester Humphrey on all things politics. Unemployment, that has been one of the big problems. Figures put it at 50% in some cases. What is your take on that? What's going on with the workers?
Unemployment is very acute. The NDC had not created many jobs. In fact, there was a net loss of jobs. If you use the figure of 50% unemployment, it's not unreal. It is not melodramatic. It is real. And that has had significant effects on the Grenadian and on the Grenadian psyche. And here again, the incompetence of the government. In 2008, after the elections, I went to the Prime Minister and I spoke to several cabinet members. And I said to them, a coming storm is on the horizon. And that storm, we knew not how long it would be. At that time, the ripples had not yet arrived at the shores of Grenada. And I said to the Prime Minister, in this coming storm, many governments would lose their position in government because of this, and we've seen this. And I said to him, the most important thing is the sustenance of jobs. I want to remind the country that in November of 2008, when the General Council of the Technical and Allied Workers Union met and analyzed the situation, the General Council passed a resolution which concluded that the principal function of the union and its main activities in the coming period and for the foreseeable future is to save the jobs of the workers. It was not for pay increases. It's not for anything else, but to saving jobs. And we saw it coming. So I went and campaigned for the Prime Minister to ensure that the CCC project remains. In those days, that was $34 million. $34 million in the economy would have made a world of difference because, you see, in a small economy like this, public sector financing and public sector projects brings in an enormous amount of foreign exchange into the economy. Private sector investment, not so much so, is the construction of roads, bridges, schools, the maintenance of buildings and other things, and that provides a lot of work, construction work. But when you looked at the world economy, and as it was collapsing, you see thousands of people, millions of people going home, right? The construction sector was shrinking. Year on year, the construction sector in Grenada since 2008 to now has shrunk by about 60%. That has serious implications, not just for jobs, but also for government revenue, right? And notwithstanding the warnings, we sat down and was able to negotiate with the CCC and to get the CCC to do this, the second phase, the B phase of that project at prices which were then 2007 prices. The CCC was committed to doing that. When the dispute arose over the administrative and other costs, the union came up again with another idea and said to them, look, why don't you go to arbitration? And we proposed a group of arbitrators that were Grenadian patriots, and let me recall the names. Uppermost of the 3 arbitrators we proposed, and they all agreed to serve, was Mr. Anselm Latouche, a celebrated Grenadian engineering genius, self-taught genius, who is regionally and universally recognized, who has a very successful firm and business. He was prepared to sit on that arbitration tribunal and hear the arguments on both sides and make recommendations. Mr. Joseph John, a Grenadian patriot, one of Grenada's oldest engineers of renown. We suggested him. And we suggested Mr. Carlisle Glean Jr., who is well known, another Grenadian patriot. What is even more important is that the CCC had agreed to appear before that body and to put its arguments forward. Now, Mr. Burke, in his usual arrogance, shot the proposal down. And this is why I don't hold, while the buck must stop with Prime Minister Thomas, the real manipulator in all of this is Nazem Burke, because he has a long-term plan, and I'll come to that if our discussion allows. Right? But he's the one who shot it down and said nobody doesn't choose for the government. But it was foolish, because let me put it to you this way. If the group of arbitrators found that the CCC pricing was out of line, and they said so, the government would win a political bonanza, because the government would be seen to protecting the public purse. At least the government will know how then it can negotiate. If those arbitrators said that the price was exorbitant, it was exploitative, etc., 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 and the fact that CCC was prepared to go to the body and argue meant that CCC was also prepared to live by the outcome of the findings and to adjust. If, on the other hand, the arbitrators found, well, it's not unreasonable, but maybe some adjustments, it meant that the government could have gotten that project up and going 2 years ago. 300 co-workers working with supplemental jobs created for self-employed, the women who freeze the juices and get the hamburger bread and make the saltfish sandwich and go on the construction site and sell. The workers out in the countryside, because remember it's farm roads, they will be eating in the small shops. We had perfect weather for construction, a lot of heat. When there's a lot of heat and construction workers are working outside there, they're drinking a lot of beer, they're drinking a lot of soft drink. These things will be selling in the small shops. So it means the economy in the rural side of the community would have been sustained. To build the same amount of roads now is $54 million, and it ain't getting off the ground. In the meantime, what has happened? Gravel and concrete now has become insolvent and is facing collapse. So they are spin-off from the failure to implement this project. And I'm saying to you, in the same economic space and within the same economic hostile environment, whatever you think about Dr. Gonzalez is lending Nazem Burke money. Dr. Gonzalez is building an international airport. And not just the airport runway and the terminal. He's had to cut down mountains and put roads through it and all of that. You go to Dominica, there's a lot of work taking place there. Chavez, after Hurricane Ivan, promised Grenada 300 houses. He sent up his army here and they built 100. Prime Minister Thomas never went to Venezuela, except the other day he sneaked out and went to Venezuela because he's in search of money now for the elections. Right? Venezuela shares maritime boundaries with Grenada. Venezuela is the richest source of oil in this part of the hemisphere. For the first time ever, we have a government in Venezuela that is not made up of the old oligarchy. That government has set up PetroCaribe. That is helping us out today. PetroCaribe is financing the school books program and several other programs and possibly paying salaries. How do you have 200 units lying in Venezuela? How do you have PetroCaribe? Chavez gave us a brand new wing for the hospital, which we squandered. Now, having squandered the money and ended up with a steel frame, Chavez was still prepared to give you more money. Yet we never went to Caracas. Not only that, for more than almost 2 years, we did not. Since Peter David was kicked out, soon thereafter, they never appointed, because you see they have a scorched earth policy. Anything to do with Peter David, good or bad, root it out. Anything to do with Keith Mitchell, good or bad, mash it up.
And the country has suffered dearly and paid dearly as a result of that.
The country has suffered. And the blame for all of this lies squarely in the hands of a small group that I describe as the parasitic technocracy. It's a small group of guys whose only interest is themselves. What they do is they surround Tillman and they eye for all the external civil service jobs. So if CEDA has a project going, and they're looking for a civil servant type to head the project and they're paying in Canadian dollars, they run, go get it. So Moses, for example, started off as a simple advisor to Tillman. And he was in Tillman's ministry, attached to Tillman. Of course, that salary is $5,500. No sooner than the public sector reform job gets, he jumps from that and takes that, because that pays in Canadian dollars, 7,000 or 8,000 or whatever Canadian dollars. And there's a group of them, and that's what they do, they shuffle themselves around. So, for example, on the PetroCaribe, where Jerome Joseph served as chairman, no sooner did they get rid of Jerome Joseph, they didn't give a businessman like Finsley St. Louis, who has years of practical experience in business, they didn't make him chairman. They didn't take a Ponte Archibald, who was a banker for many years, and put him at the head of PetroCaribe. Who takes it? No. Aaron Moses. So that's what they do. And this is why I call it, they're a parasitic group whose only interest really is feathering the nest themselves.
So how is that behavior you just described? How is that different from what the NNP was accused of?
Save and accept. I challenge any one of them. I challenge any one of them. And I know they say that I'm an NNP supporter. That's all right with me, because I'm an independent person and you know that. I challenge any one of them to take the 48 months that they have been advisors and effectively running the government and compare it to any 48 months under Keith, and the working class was better off. Of all the years I criticized Keith, he never locked me up. I am the second trade union leader locked up in this country for defending workers. The first one was Gary in 1951. How many years? Close to 70 years later, I'm the second person. And that is, I have never personally asked this government for a thing.
So what you're saying is that in most respects, we are not better off today than we were 5 years ago.
Evidence is there. And that is not to say I'm being soft on the abuse the country suffered under Dr. Mitchell. There's no doubt about that. That's not to say that I'm going soft on his maladministration, because there's a lot of evidence about that. Right? But what I can show you, after 48 months, I can't point to anything. After any 48 months under Keith, I could point to a few things that were done. And I could point to the programs from which working people that I represent, that I fight for on a daily basis, that make up my life, right? They have benefited. Okay? You know, so the question is, do I have confidence that they'll be able to manage this thing out? And I said no, simply because we are being led by a backward, parasitic technocracy and by a leadership that has reverted to what I would call the fetters of the past. Right? So as I said to you before, even with all the strategic assistance, do you know that cooking gas in St. Vincent is about half the price, or thereabout, or a little more than half the price than it is in Grenada?
So there we have a cost of living issue.
Is available through Petrocaribe.
Oh, okay.
That facility of cooking gas in the bigger cylinder is available through Petrocaribe. But of the sheer incompetence,
Why are we not able to enjoy that same facility, given that Petrocaribe is here?
Incompetent. There's no leadership. There's no foci. What is there?
Tillman and them say, what is $150? And when they get in power, they will make it $400.
In 2008, NDC promised so much, but has delivered so little. The NDC legacy: broken promises, failed leadership.
Welcome back. We're speaking to Senator Chester Humphrey on all things politics. Did some of our foreign policy decisions and the foreign policy outlook of the Prime Minister and the government affect some of our chances for development?
Prime Minister is living in a Cold War mode. This is a new world. This is a new world. A new world where there are opportunities, but you have to face them. You have to take the chances. This is not an ideological world. It's not an ideological world. It's a world of business and opportunity. And we just have to look at it. When our Prime Minister went to the People's Republic of China, he came back with a couple of motorcycles and a few $1 million. Prime Minister Baldwin Spencer went 10 months later.
And he came back with $100 and something million in benefits.
In the same regional economic challenge that we face in the region, as I said to you, Ralph Gonzalez is building an international, or continuing to build an international airport in Antigua that has serious economic challenges as well. They are putting down an ultra-modern alternative airport terminal that has a capacity of something about 3,000 to 4,000 tourists a day. And that facility is ultra-modern. The wide-body jets that will be landing in Antigua comes to port alongside. So you no longer walk out on the tarmac. That's a modern facility. It's now 45% complete. They're building a mega hotel arrangement there. So I'm saying we all face difficulties. But what is the defining difference as we spoke to foreign policy? I said to you, when Prime Minister Spencer went about 10 months after Prime Minister Tillman Thomas, he came back with a wide economic package. Yes? Up to this day, we can't get the hotel project that Mr. Burke promised us off the ground. But let us look at how the NDC operates. It is claimed that Dr. Mitchell gave away our heritage and our patrimony on the Grand Beach issue. Let us assume or say to some extent I agree to that. I agree with that. But the fact of the matter is it was a deal already done. The most sensible thing to do is to make the thing work. What did we do? The Prime Minister focused his energies not on getting a 5-star hotel on that facility, but on taking back the leasehold. He now has the leasehold, but what has he done with it? We have a deteriorated hotel, no additional jobs, significant rotation. The hotel product is continuously being scarred because of the reputation that's there. This is a Grenadian who had put up some money and who was prepared to invest. In other words, a sensible, level-headed prime minister would see, how do I work this bad deal? The Hamiltons have said they are not interested in the leasehold per se. They were prepared to give the leasehold back to Grenada. What they want is the facilities for the government to use its acquisition resources and powers, acquire the hotel, give it to them so that they will develop a 5-star facility which would have created jobs. Now they're being sued for compensation as they forcefully in other words, they carried out a fight that was not necessary. And at the end of the day, we are no better off for it. Because there's a contest now in the court over the $40 million that Hamilton now has sued for. You don't know what the outcome of that is. That could very well be a debt against taxpayers of this country. 48 months have passed, and the site of the hotel is the same. Has not been upgraded, no jobs created, facing rotation of the workers, 50%, etc., etc., etc. And it is that kind of malaise, is that kind of backward thinking that has afflicted this country. Right? In addition to which, there was a growing tendency within the NDC of an anti-union, anti-worker program. And we've seen this in the Bureau's issue. The dispute in Barbados has just settled after a 10-hour meeting between Cable and Wireless and the union. The Prime Minister intervened, summoned the parties together, averted a national strike, and the government concluded that the actions of the company was disrespectful. Cable and Wireless now has to issue an apology. What happened here in Grenada? In the Bureau struggle, the Minister of Labour was removed by the Prime Minister without any consultation. The Labour Commissioner was removed simply because the businessman demanded that the government take these steps. And when we went to the meeting, in which Prime Minister Mr. Burke and Mr. Noel were the ones who took over the whole arrangement, Mr. Burke told us this is not what the government wants, it's what the company wants. And the Prime Minister unceremoniously removed his Minister of Labour in violation of the principles of Cabinet because she was appointed. In other words, her position was lawful. The Labour Commissioner's role is defined in law. A politician on his own, not going through the Public Service Commission, cannot usurp the powers or change the powers of a Labour Commissioner. So here it was the Prime Minister intervening and going against his own principles by not respecting the Public Service Commission when he took away the Labour Commissioner from doing what he's supposed to do unceremoniously. Now, we've asked, imagine, I went journey to Carriacou and I got the party at its second highest body, the General Council, unanimously. The Prime Minister voted for it. Nazim Burke voted for it. In fact, Nazim Burke introduced an amendment to the resolution that I brought, which was adopted, and unanimously agreed. The party unanimously agreed to support the amendments to 661. We went to speak to the Prime Minister in a delegation headed by President of the TUC, Madonna Harford. The Prime Minister gave us a commitment that the government was going to support it. The government offered an amendment and we accepted it. The matter came to the Senate. And everybody on the government side spoke in support of the motion. The NNP supported the motion, but they had some reservations. It went to the floor and was passed. That is after that intense struggle in which a trade union leader was facing charges before the court and was locked up in a police holding cell. The Prime Minister said his government was supporting the amendment. When it was passed in the Senate and it went down to the House, Mr. Nazim Burke single-handedly destroyed it. Knowing fully well, Nazim Burke took the amendment off the order paper. Knowing fully well that they were going to prorogue, meaning that the bill did not and would not succeed as an amendment in law. It's either you had two prime ministers or you have one. So as we stand here today, 66-1 has never been amended after what has happened to the brewery workers. We got a resolution, I got a unanimous resolution passed in the first convention of the NDC after 2008. The 2009 convention at the Grenada Boys Secondary School Auditorium passed unanimously a resolution brought by me to remove income tax on severance pay. Nazim Burke single-handedly refused to implement it. And when he implemented it only for a limited time. So that if any worker in cable and wireless or any other workplace get retrenched today, they will have to pay the 30% tax. And Mr. Burke is coming to the workers for a vote. Mr. Burke, the workers need to tell Mr. Burke where to go.
And coming to the point, what was the mood of the workers going into this election? What are you picking up from your constituents?
Well, there are mixed views. Some people have a degree of hope that things will change and the economic burdens on them will be released. Some people believe that with a change, an impending change in the government, there will be some fillip in the economy. So it's a mixed mood. Some people are saddened by what has ultimately happened, that Grenada had a great opportunity for carving a bold new way forward. And that opportunity was squandered on the altar of partisanship and narrow-mindedness and selfishness, right? And the country now is left in a state of kind of confusion. We should not have been there. We should have a clear policy of growth and so going forward. This is what we have now is really just confusion. This is what we have. And to many people are despondent and depressed. Many people have opted out of the political process.
Is there really a big fear that a lot of people will stay away from the polls?
There are
indications that this would be so.
There are indications that this would be so. I don't know for certain. But what I can tell you is that the morale of working people have been significantly affected by the paralysis that the NDC brought on this country. Now, I take personal responsibility for contributing to that, right? But as I said to people, in life, you take chances, you step out. When a bird, a baby bird which has never flown before is going to fly for the first time, it's a chance it's going to take. When a swimmer who couldn't swim goes into the water for the first time, it's a chance he's going to take. But you can't learn to swim unless you go into the water. And a baby bird can't fly unless the mother releases it from the nest. So that every brave step in life that marks a significant watershed has risk. And the future is unknown. Of course, you can prepare for it.
Do you think we pay too high a price for that risk?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I think what we did was to squander the opportunity. We squandered the opportunity. I mean, look at the state of the hospital. Look at the state of our medical services. We railed and rolled against the foresters. We took away the forester facility. And we promised to put a modern dialysis unit in place. Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? So that has depressed a lot of people, and certainly for labor it has not been a very difficult situation for us. So just to summarize, the economy will be the main feature. I listened to Dr. Mitchell the other night, and I think that he encapsulated it right. And that his main message, he's been able to package, he's packaging what he's saying better. Whether or not he will ultimately turn out to be the better leader that he says he's committed to, only time will tell. But this is the choice, these are the choices that we have. In the South, for example, I would urge the workers to vote Glennis. And the reason why is Glennis has stood on the side of working people. The security guards who had their minimum wage increase for the first time in 12 years was a result of the struggle of Glennis Roberts. The minimum wage bill was Glennis Roberts' baby, and she brought it to life. With fierce opposition from Mr. Burke. fierce opposition. So the security guard today, who's currently getting $8, owe that to Glenys. And I would call on all the workers in her constituency, give Labour a voice in the parliament. Give Labour a voice in the parliament. Don't give one party all the seats. Even if you are an NNP supporter, or for that matter, NDC supporter, when you go to the poll, put the voice of NAF in the parliament. It would not be a betrayal of the party you support. It will be an advancement of your interest to ensure that Labour has a voice. And that's my final appeal.
I noticed you said vote to Ms. Roberts, don't give one party all the seats. So at the end of the day, you're envisioning a 14-1 coming down the line?
I don't play the numbers and I don't call the numbers. I don't play the numbers and I don't call the numbers.
We all agree 15 won't be good for anybody.
And I don't even believe Dr. Mitchell would want 15. It would be a good historic record because no one has ever done it before. The problem with the NDC is that its future is written in its past. There's been no singular political party ever in the history of Grenada to have suffered such a monumental defeat. Not even H.A. Blaze suffered a total annihilation and a total loss. So that the NDC was the only and the first political party to be so humiliated. And you will remember that in January of 2010, I warned against where we are right now. You could recall that? When I said that the NDC is headed for a one term, and I warned Tillman that the only how you can avoid this is to continue to practice inclusiveness, not exclusive government. And lo and behold, he made the choice of exclusive government and started cutting up and bringing people and seeing people in ideological prisons and harp back to a more backward past rather than understanding that we live in a modern world with new opportunities. Because you see, you can't see the modern world with old glasses. You can't see, else you miss the opportunities. And that's precisely what has happened to us, is that the NDC essentially became a caricature of the GNP. A party steeped in ruling class, upper middle class type politics with no real linkage and organic links to the working man and woman. There were those of us who tried to give it that feature, who tried to connect it to working people. But those on the other side who were resisting and playing the game of machinations succeeded. And this is why we are where we are today. But let's see what the results will bring. I may be right, I may be wrong, I don't know. But only time will tell. But I strongly believe that the future of the NDC is written in its past. Because I predicted in January 2010 where the NDC was eventually ended up. I predicted that this would happen. So I'm not claiming divine or biblical portions. Not claiming that at all. No, I'm not making that claim. But for one who has actively been involved in the country's politics.
And a trade unionist must be involved in politics, as another trade unionist was a joker.
You know, one of the things that you mentioned earlier in the interview, you talked about Nazim Burke's long-term plans, and those are things that's something that's been hinted a lot, and a lot of the problems we have encountered seem to be hinged on these long-term plans of the
Well, let me put it to you this way, and we don't have enough time to talk about it. Mm-hmm. But inside of the NDC, when Peter David joined, he joined as the General Secretary. When Nazim joined, he joined and became the PRO. In that history, between then and now, no one ever brought a resolution or nominated Peter David for any other office. They did for Naz. Teddy Victor moved a motion to have Naz contest against Tillman Thomas.
For leader.
And the only reason why the motion never got going is because nobody seconded it. Not even Naz stood up and declined. And that's important. There are things that I can say, but I wouldn't say it at the moment. There are things that I can say. But what I would say to Tilly is this. the enemy in the camp more dangerous than the enemy outside.
And on that note, I would like to thank you for coming on Business Files.
Yes.
Thank you for talking to us. This is Business Files. When we come back, I'm going to give my 2 cents on all of this. We'll be right back.
Grenada's rescue mission begins February 19th, 2013. Get ready, Grenada, to vote the party of unity and revival. The new National Party says, when the challenges are biggest, the politics has to be different. And so, the new National Party seeks to unite all Grenadians for national development. Prepare to vote for the future on February 19th, 2013. The new National Party, we will deliver.
So I said the wind of change is blowing in the next direction.
Welcome back to the program. At this point, it's where I get to put my 2 cents in on all that is happening, and the silly season is here, as we like to call it. One of the most important things that people need to remember is that elections, it's a serious thing. There's this, what I keep picking up as this lack of seriousness from people on their focus for the elections, that it means a little bit more than wearing the t-shirts and going to the rallies. And yes, you have to support your individual political parties, but we have to put the country first. We have to start making mature political decisions. We have to put aside the personal feelings and the petty jealousies and stuff like that, and make decisions that will benefit us nationally. If something isn't going the way we need it to go, we need to try to fix it, and we need to have a focus as a people as to where we want to go. It's not really up to the politicians as to where we want to go, but where we want to go has to be decided by us, and then we demand and expect nothing less from the people that we elect to lead us. So as we head into the February 19th general elections, I want us to all remember that it really is up to us, the kind of government and the kind of governance that we end up getting as a people. This is Business Files, and I'm Callistra Faria. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time.